What happens when you get a passionate New Yorker who absolutely loves pizza and yet they're vegan and they have yet to find a good vegan pizza? Well, you start your own vegan pizza cheese company. Owner Kobi Regev and his wife Aviv saw an opportunity in the lack of quality vegan pizza options available when they switched to a plant-based diet in 2014. In today's episode, you're going to hear how they started the company, the obstacles they came across, and what they're doing today. You're in for a great treat on the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show.
Welcome to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show, where your host, Kathleen Gage, shines the spotlight on vegan and plant-based businesses and entrepreneurs from all walks of life committed to cruelty-free eating, healthy lifestyles, animal compassion, and the environment. Enjoy the show.
You know, Kobi, I am really intrigued by your background. You have quite the illustrious background. You've been in high-end jewelry sales, real estate. You're an inventor. You're constantly looking for new ways to improve the quality of people's lives. And you're vegan. I love that. We wouldn't be having this conversation if you weren't vegan, because that is a criteria for people on my shows. And I'm curious, let's start with when you became vegan.
Yeah, that's a funny story that at this point my wife is sick of. But I'll just tell you the really short version of it. About 8 years ago is when we made the transition. And so one day my wife, who was still my girlfriend at the time, she came home and she said, "Kobi, I'm going to do a challenge. You don't have to do it. Don't worry. It's just for me. But I'm going to be vegan for the next 22 days. And I remember just laughing and going, okay, good luck. Like, that's on you. As long as I don't have to do it, we're fine. And on the second day of her challenge, she was watching a lecture by Gary Yourofsky.
Mm-hmm.
And she was watching it on her laptop, and I was just watching TV. And she caught me reading the captions from the corner of my eye, and she's like, aha. And she's like, I knew you'd like this. So she just took it, put it on the big screen. And, you know, at first I thought it was very, just like every meat eater at the time, or any meat eater, like I felt like there was a lot of attack against me and my choices. And what really put everything into perspective for me, because I have a advertising, television, like I have a very eclectic background. But he said, he put it like this. He's like, when you watch TV and there's a commercial break, the first part of the commercials is always people happy eating foods from restaurants. And the last portion of the commercial breaks is people like needing heart medication or something for health related. And he's like, don't you see like how the machine is like both creating the problem at the same time and finding a cure for it? And that when that was consciously put in front of me, and I understood that I could improve my health by avoiding all the foods that I grew up on, I was like, you know what, I could give it 22 days. And I remember on the second week, somebody said to me, "Oh, Kobi, you're vegan now. Like, do you have superpowers? Can you run a marathon? Like, what's special and different about you?" And before this challenge, I had a lot of heartburn, and I couldn't sleep at night without taking Tums or whatever. And I just like thought about it when that person said it to me. I was like, I'm sleeping a whole night. I'm not tossing and turning. I can sleep. And that was a huge deal that like, it was so innocuous, like it just happened.
Right.
Like I didn't even think about it. And I'm like, wow, like I'm not suffering. And of course, on my last day of the challenge, I was like, I need pizza. Like I ran to my favorite pizzeria. I was like, I did it. Now I can have pizza again. And I had 3 slices. I felt amazing for 10 minutes and I felt horrible for 3 days. And that's when I knew I need to make a change in my life.
Mhm.
And it was gradual, it wasn't overnight. But every time I did something different, or if I went and ate an animal-based product, I always felt sick afterwards. So I kind of equate it to, like when I was younger, I was a smoker, and
Mhm.
so it was 9 months between quitting smoking and having my last cigarette, and that was kind of how my transition took place. But once I made the full transition, and that was after I saw Forks Over Knives, like that was it for me. And the journey, I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, so I know how hard it is for a lot of people to change their lifestyles,
Right, right.
and how families are and everything around that. But at the end of the day, you're making a better choice for yourself, for the planet, for the animals, for everyone. And so I don't see any way for me personally to go back. So.
Well, and you really hit on a lot of stuff there. There's so much to unwrap around. One is the changes that happen without us really realizing it until somebody points it out or they ask us a question. I know that when I first went quote unquote plant-based, because I didn't want to be a vegan, it was like,
Yeah.
oh God, no, you vegans are crazy. I couldn't possibly do that.
Me too.
And now my business is vegan visibility. It's like, okay, go figure. But quite seriously, it was like I started connecting the dots, but I noticed within a few days my inflammation was gone, and that's why I changed my eating. But I wouldn't commit to it forever. It was kind of like 7 days and I'll do it. So similar to you. Now I've heard of 21-day challenges, 30-day challenges, Veganuary, but I've not heard of a 22-day challenge. Was it a vegan challenge or was it a plant-based eating challenge?
I think it was, I'll be honest with you. I'm pretty sure it was like a book Beyonce read.
Okay.
and
So that means you probably did the lemonade cleanse. That means, or your wife did. I mean, it's amazing when these stars do something and then we all kind of follow suit. But then what we come to realize is, as you talked about the animals and the environment, and it really goes into many, many layers. And now you knew that you loved pizza. And so you actually did something that most of us could not even, we don't even know where to begin, but you actually created a cheese, and out of that you created the Pleese Cheese Company. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'll try to tell the very condensed story because I could sit here for hours and I don't think anybody wants to hear that. But it all, and the story always starts the same, and maybe I'll censor it a little bit for your viewers, but like, after I had changed my diet completely, I was having lunch with my brother, and I was having a salad, and he was having like tikka masala, something with chicken. And he's a quiet guy, introvert, and we're just sitting, like we're across from each other, and neither one of us we're not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just having my salad, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, he just like looks up at me and is like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "What?" And like, what kind of New Yorker are you? How can you live without pizza? What's wrong with you? And he was like, I was taken aback, but he like hit something that really was something about my personality that I like had decided to forego, because in my 20s, it didn't matter what time of day or night it was. You would tell me where in Manhattan you were, and I would tell you where to get a slice of pizza. And I would know by the time of day and day where you should go. And so that was my personality before. Like, that's why on my last day of the challenge, I went to my favorite pizzeria. Like, I had to have pizza. And so when he said that to me, I remember telling my girlfriend at the time the story, and how I knew she would be my wife is on the phone. She was like, "We're going to show him." And she went to the supermarket and she bought like pre-made dough, and she got ingredients for a sauce, and she bought the available standard plant-based cheese that you would find in the supermarket 8 years ago. And she made the ugliest pizza you ever saw in your life, but it had been so long since we had cheese that I was eating it, and although it was ugly, I just remember going, well, it's better than nothing. Like it's better than nothing. I can have this because I don't eat cheese anymore, and it's cheesy enough. But I just remember looking at it and saying, no New Yorker is going to accept this as pizza. And that challenge of like, how are we going to make, and I don't have a culinary background. I only started cooking when I changed my diet. But that challenge of going, how do we make a vegan pizza that a New Yorker would want is what drove us, like the entirety of the entire mission, our entire life goal is based on that. And really, the mission behind Pleese Foods is that no kid should have to settle for an ugly pizza at a party.
I love that. And when we talked prior to having this conversation, you mentioned about the kids and about the school system and the milk in the school system, and how much kids are really forced to eat meat or cheese and drink milk, and how unhealthy it is. And so, what year did you start your company?
The transition in my diet was 2014. So it used to just be a hobby. It used to just be something on Instagram that we started in 2015. And by 2017, we had gone through enough, we've done enough events, and we were part of an incubator in New York that was run by a group called Hot Bread Kitchen in Harlem. Mm-hmm. And having gone through that, that program, because originally we were going to open a restaurant. So we went through that program and we realized that we should not just focus on a restaurant, we should make cheese for restaurants. And that was May of 2017 when we founded the first version of our company. We raised it took us 6 months to write our business plan and get people involved and actually turn it into something. Mm-hmm. That was 2018 when we started our initial work of scaling it up, like taking it as from our homemade recipe to something that you can actually mass produce in a factory, which is completely different. So that was 2018, and then my daughter was born that summer. And I remember we had gone through all these different experiences, and I had my first big pitch with the Glass Wall Syndicate, and I was so sleepless and so like stuck in my head and like scared and like not knowing how, like, I'm a dad now, I'm starting a company, like how do I bring this to fruition? Like I shouldn't have left my job. Like I was going through all these moments, and at the event, I got the yips. I like froze. I couldn't speak. I didn't know how to talk about my company, and I was an embarrassment. Like I was a total embarrassment at this event, and I remember just being like heartbroken about everything that happened. But I had to press on. Like this is my what I'm creating for my family. This is what I'm doing for the planet. Like I had to press on, and all of a sudden I found out about Plant-Based World, which happened in 2019.
Be sure to leave a rating and review of the show. And if you're looking for more visibility, be sure to download my free guide on how to increase your influence. It's called The Influencer's Guide. Simply go to veganvisibility.com/influencer. That's veganvisibility.com/influencer. Now, back to the show.
So I was able to take the recipe from our commercial scale batch. Like I was able to recreate the recipe at home, and then in a commercial kitchen for the event. And I said, you know what? I don't have a factory to produce it in yet, but I can't miss out this opportunity. So
Mhm.
I like for 4 days I slaved over making like it took me 4 days to make 20 pounds of product back then. The first time we ran it in a factory, it took them 10 minutes to do
Oh
40
my
pounds.
gosh.
So and that was in the pilot. And then when we did our first scale up, they did I think it was 900 pounds in less than an hour.
Wow.
So like
Well,
all
let's take a step back there. I
yeah,
want to talk about that process because so often people get an idea for something, whether it's an actual physical product or it's an e-based product, and they just say, "I'm going to create this thing." Like I hear people all the time, "I'm going to create an app." It's like, great, that's wonderful. You're going to create an app, but how are you going to scale it? How are you going to grow it? And so, with going from making the cheese in your kitchen, what was the first set of ingredients that you used, and did it change over time? And then from there, what was the actual process for somebody listening who wants to start a business, a manufacturing business, a food business? What do they need to know so that they don't make the same mistakes that you and many other people have made, that you can help them prevent that?
yeah. So I think the first thing I would suggest is before you dive in completely, make sure to spend as much time getting an education on what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
And that's a very loaded statement, because what does that mean? Because when you start your own business, especially in the beginning, you have to wear all the hats. So you need to know bookkeeping, you need to know operations, you need to know logistics, you need to know sourcing, you need to know marketing, and you have to be comfortable in all these different roles. So I suggest anyone who would like if you're uncomfortable doing one thing or another, like if you say like I want to do this but I don't want to be on TikTok,
Mhm.
then either learn how to be on TikTok, and there's ways to do it. Like I don't mean specifically on TikTok, but take a public speaking class or do something where you can build on that experience where it's not like live in front of an audience that you're
Mhm.
trying to like create your livelihood from, and get as much of that experience as possible firsthand. And another thing, like things change so quickly. I'll give you an example. That first summer in 2017, spent like 4 months writing a 16-page business plan, because when I went to college 15 years before that, that was common. That was the
Mhm.
standard, 16 pages. That same like a few months later, I found out the standard became 2 pages, and so then it was condensing 16 pages into 2 pages and not knowing where to start, because I was writing a bibliography and I was like really like justifying my research. It was like writing a thesis about my business, and that's not what people needed. They needed the 2 pages. Like, should I invest in this? Should I not invest in it? And so that I think knowing uh, all different aspects of that is super important. And now I'm just going to tell you where to go to get this in New York. And there's something called Score NYC, and that's a mentorship program.
Mhm.
So that's in New York City, but I'm sure there's several programs like that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've actually done some training for SCORE where we volunteer as entrepreneurs, we volunteer our time, and it's kind of passing on the legacy that we've been given. So yeah, SCORE is fantastic.
Score is great. And then something I found out about in my journey to find a facility to manufacture my product is the Small Business Development
Mhm.
Association, SBDAs.
SBDA. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenal resource. And because I lived in Harlem, or I still live in Harlem, but because I had moved into the Harlem area, I was able to go to the Columbia University has the program. So I was able to take classes at Columbia University at their business school, part of part of the SBDA that they have.
Well, and I'm so glad you're mentioning this because you're actually reminding me of early on in my business, the things that I did. I would go to as many chamber meetings as I could where they were training meetings, and they would bring in successful entrepreneurs to teach us whatever it was for that particular meeting. SBA, SCORE, economic development, and there are resources out there for people that they need to know about so they can tap into it. Now, you mentioned about an incubator program. What was that?
So the one I was speaking about specifically was called Hot Bread Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very interesting program. It was run by, you were saying DOE. I think it was run by, there's an organization in New York that runs it. I forget which one. It's like the Economic Development, one of those corporations. So Hot Bread Kitchen, it was occupying a space in Spanish Harlem under the train line. And it used to be, I think, like a butcher shop, or it used to be something. And then with the Economic Development Corporation of New York, they converted it into a commercial kitchen for half of it. And the other half became a bakery that was supplying goods for Whole Foods and other markets in the tri-state region. And they had taught women from minority or immigrant backgrounds, or giving them a skill, a labor skill. So that's how that was the purpose of that organization. And part of having the commercial kitchen there is they wanted to make sure that there would be people using it. So there was an educational program involved in that as well. So the educational incubator that we're a part of is called a business boot camp. And they really took us through every single step. And the most important part was the pitch. And those, I had done a lot of I worked in sales, so I've done a lot of pitches, a lot of moments interacting with people, but my wife hadn't done that. And a lot of other people in the room hadn't done that. So just having those opportunities to practice is so, so important, because it builds on your experience, and then you feel more comfortable the next time every time you have to do it afterwards.
Well, let's look at, the journey that you've taken in your business. What would you say has been the greatest obstacle or the greatest challenge that you've faced? You talked about a period where you had sleepless nights and how am I going to make this work? And, those are real emotions that we as entrepreneurs deal with. And a lot of people say, oh, I want to start my own business so I can have freedom. And it's like, it doesn't quite work like that. So what would you say have been some of your greatest challenges? Or let's take the number one challenge in the time that you've been running your business.
Yeah, so I think I'm in a unique situation compared to who's going to be listening to this. So, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But my biggest challenge from the beginning was starting my own business and still living in Manhattan, and that is something that I didn't consider, because I just lived there, and my life is there. I live in New York. That's who I am. I'm going to sell it in New York. You make it here, you can make it anywhere. And our rent was fine for when I had a high paying job and my wife's job at the same time. But the second I started, one of the things I started doing when I left my position, as a jewelry salesperson, was I went and worked in a pizzeria, and I worked at a juice press, and I worked at little places, because as I said, we wanted to open our own restaurant. So I wanted to gain as much experience as possible, but those are not high paying jobs. So most of my colleagues lived in the Bronx, or they lived somewhere else, and I was just in my neighborhood. And so that lifestyle, that was just, that's how I lived. And it wasn't, I lived in a 600 square foot apartment. It's not like I'm, living the life of luxury or anything huge or anything, but Manhattan is an expensive island. And that was one of the biggest challenges we had to cope with. So the first thing we did is we moved from, I grew up on the Upper West Side. I moved to Harlem, the Upper West Side. And and we were able to save $1,000 a month just on rent, and that was very crucial. But you know, today I spend most of the day on Long Island. I was going to visit different restaurants that we started working with out there, and I was just as I was driving by, there's like huge warehouses and storefronts and whatever for a fraction of the cost of what it would cost to do anything
Right.
in Manhattan. But I'm from, I wouldn't know how to live any other way. So I would say, yeah, if you want to continue to live your life, whatever you're accustomed to, and you want to start your own business, plan a lot further ahead than I did.
Well, and I so appreciate you sharing that, Kobi, because a lot of times people let their ego get in the way and they think that, it's like early on in my business. I've been with my partner now my wife now, we've been together 33 years. Early in the business, she had to go literally get a part-time job putting widgets in little bags at $7 an hour to put food on the table while I was going out building the business. And I didn't want people to know initially. And now it's a great story to tell of how we did whatever it took to make the business grow. But I think sometimes, we get our ego in the way and we have this perception of what it means to be an entrepreneur. And then you add to that an entrepreneur within the vegan space. And when I decided to rebrand myself, I've had my business 28 years now. And about a year ago, I rebranded from Power Up for Profits into Vegan Visibility. And I was cautioned by many people, don't do it. That's a mistake. It's not a big enough market. And yet I had other people who were like, oh, that's such a great idea. What a unique market. And both sides of it, these were people who were not vegan. So it was kind of interesting to hear the perspective. And I tend to believe that sometimes we have people who will mirror our belief in ourselves and our doubt in ourselves. And as you look at where your business is going, what needs to happen with your business to take it to the next level? What is it that you need to do, or the growth you need to go through in order to get to that next level?
Yeah, so right now, as the CEO of my company, and if I really want to grow the company to where I believe it's going to be, and it's not just me, it's also all the people who buy and use our product currently, is we're in the process of raising more capital. As a CEO, that becomes your job. I have all these other jobs, but that's the big job. And really just take our company from this, like, let's say it like this, all the hard work to establish the foundation of the company, the brand, and the product have been accomplished. And those are usually the biggest risks that people are most uncomfortable investing in. So now that we have traction and we went from 8 locations last year to we're going to close the year probably in 75 locations, if not more, a lot has been accomplished within that year. It hasn't just been getting into those locations, it's maintaining them and how to grow the visibility of your product and the brand within those locations. I went to a pizzeria today and I invested in signage and a lot of different things to put visibility there, but then they did something that I didn't expect or anticipate. And when I go in on the cash register, they have a little LCD screen, and they took a screen grab from my website where it says, please, perfectly melting plant, whatever. And then underneath they wrote, ask for it by name. And I'm like, holy moly, that is like they hit the nail on the head. That's like the coolest thing. How did they come up with a better marketing thing than me? But they came up with this, so they embraced it and they really loved everything that we created. And neither one of the owners is vegan. They just want to have a product that, we had a really interesting conversation today, because usually I'm the one who's pitching restaurants, now people have a family member that is gluten-free, so you should have I'm usually the one pitching that, and they're the ones telling me about it. I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm here. So it's just really cool to see from those 16-page business plan where I hypothesized that this would be a thing, to seeing it become real. And part of just, I'm sorry, I know you're
No,
about
go
to
ahead. Go ahead.
but just to answer your question, because I went on a tangent as I tend to.
That's because you're an entrepreneur. That's just the nature of the beast.
But the reality of the situation is there's customers that want the product. There's
Right.
operators, meaning restaurants, that want to embrace the product. And the missing link is actually the buyers in the distribution, like the food service distribution companies. And they have become so set in their ways that, whoever was first to market with them, whoever established that relationship with them, it's like now I feel like I've bonded with that company, and it doesn't matter if that's a good product or a bad product. We had a
Mhm.
handshake, which is not a bad thing. Like I appreciate loyalty when it comes to these things, but my counter argument always has to be, yeah, but why don't you give your customer a choice and make money both ways? Like
Right.
what's the harm in making, because in vegan you might have like five, 6 brands tops, but in regular or traditional animal based cheese, meat, whatever, there's thousands of options. And so it's kind of funny when people get very specific, like, oh, I have a meat alternative already, I can't buy any other. No, give
Mhm.
them options.
Mhm.
One of them
Right.
had this, one has that, like there's just, and they do that with all the other products. So I think that there's a learning curve that's really missing when it comes to the distributors.
Right.
But back to, but just to connect the dots of like not leaving New York City when I started my own business, the one thing that I've seen that how we stand out is because we're in New York City, we see all the different ways to make pizza. And we talk to all the people who are not shy about telling you their opinion about your product, your price point, etc. And you really get an understanding that most of the people who are like either on the West Coast or in the Midwest don't get to experience firsthand. So
Right. Right.
the cost of living is more, but I'm in front of there's 2,800 locations in New York City that sell pizza. So
That's incredible. Well,
yeah,
I have an idea I want to share with you, but before we do, I want to connect the dots on this. Is your wife still vegan?
yeah, we're both my entire family,
No,
me us
and
and our
tell me
two
about your
daughters,
family. You have how many kids?
2 daughters, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old.
And they're both vegan?
100%.
I love that because it's so interesting because right now there's a lot of talk about kids that are being raised vegan. And, I had one woman who said her neighbor was going to turn her into social services for raising her kid vegan. It's like, for raising your kid healthy and compassionate. But on a different topic, and we can look at the stats and realize that a plant-based vegan child is going to be a lot healthier than the kids that are now. It's up to about 50% obesity rate in children. And it's like, this is crazy, not just overweight, but obesity. And with that comes so many other health issues. But that really leads into the question that in our previous conversation, you mentioned that your wife used to work within the school system, and there was a lot of milk that was thrown out because the milk companies, the manufacturers, they were funding getting milk in the school system. Tell us a little bit about that, because I've got an idea here that I'm going to just throw out to you. You do with it what you will. But first of all, let's talk about the school systems.
Yeah, so I want to connect one dot before we get into the school systems, where you're talking about, a parent saying they would call social services on another parent. I'll tell you the truth. One of my cousins who just laughs at me that I'm vegan now because he's been vegetarian his whole life. When he had kids 10 years before me, I said something similar. I didn't say I'd call social services, but I said,
Wow.
that's not really healthy. This, that. How did I know? I saw an episode of House on TV. That's how I knew. No, like,
Social proof. No, I get it. I mean, and But get this, Kobi, because really food manufacturers, they do product placement in these TV shows. And so there is a lot of propaganda in TV shows, and we're led to believe things that aren't necessarily true. So continue on.
And a great example exactly of what you're saying is how people feel about soy. One of the reasons I think that, like, I personally know about the negativity of soy is from watching like a literal 30-second bit on The Big Bang Theory. So like it's like all it takes is like a show to say something like a sentence, and that gets stuck into your consciousness for the rest of your life. So it took me to be deprogrammed from that, to admit to my cousin years later is like, I'm sorry, I'm a schmuck. Like I but I didn't know. Like I just got those snippets of information today. Right. How I know what I love about my eldest daughter, the 4-year-old, is that she'll go to a party or she'll go to an event. We'll always have something for her. And today there's so many options that it's not like it was when I was growing up, or my cousin or anybody else. But she'll look at the table and she'll ask us, like, is that vegan? And if we say no, and we just say, no, that's not vegan, she'll be like, okay. And she doesn't want it.
Wow.
She doesn't, and that's something really great, like as a gift that we can give her. And will she always be vegan? I don't know. I'm not going to, Joaquin Phoenix had the same thing. Like, I don't know what they're going to choose for the rest of their lives. But to connect back to your dot before we get into the school thing.
Be sure to leave a rating and review of the show. And if you're looking for more visibility, be sure to download my free guide on how to increase your influence. It's called The Influencer's Guide. Simply go to veganvisibility.com/influencer. That's veganvisibility.com/influencer. Now, back to the show.
Is that I grew up on the North American diet. All I craved as a kid, my daughter's age today, was Happy Meals, chicken nuggets that weren't really chicken. Like I craved these things, and I was brainwashed into thinking that unless it was a specific brand or from a specific restaurant or whatever, then it's not good. It's not good for you. And that's how I grew up. So with my kids, I don't subject them to commercials. I try to, because I was one of those kids that you just left in front of the TV. And
right.
And the one, how I tell this, a big difference between my generation growing up and like my kids is there was no internet. So I had to memorize the commercial for the toy I wanted. And when my mom would come home later, I would give her the whole like, act now and for $19.99. It would always kill her. Like how it was just really funny to her. But that's because I didn't know how to write at 4 years old, but I memorized the commercials.
Right.
But anyway, so that's like how we grew up. And then our kid, like today, everything's on the internet. You just type it in, or Instagram, whatever. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent. And I want to connect back to what you started, because I know you have an idea that you want to share with me. So when we started this whole, when we started our own company in 2017, when I started sitting in front of the computer to write out the business plan, we started running out of income. We weren't producing enough income. And my wife, because at the time we still wanted to open our own pizzeria, I told her, she had left her previous job, and I told her, go work in a fast food restaurant, like go work somewhere and get experience. And she went to Domino's, she went to all these places, and she was literally just sitting in McDonald's, like about, as a vegan, which is always funny. Yeah. And she was filling out the paperwork, and she got a call from a friend of hers about a school in Harlem. Sorry, the light's on my face. A school in Harlem that is a charter language academy and the language just happens to be Hebrew.
Mhm.
And the idea of that was fascinating to my wife, and and they told her, like, come today, like, let's interview you, let's see if you're appropriate for it. And she went from that McDonald's to the interview, and she got it the same day. So it was a really, like, a funny moment in our lives, because that was what helped us continue to live in
Like,
Manhattan.
my wife putting widgets in a bag for $7 an
Exactly.
hour. It put food on the table. I mean, that is the reality of it.
100%. And exactly, that's why I think we have a good kinship. Um, but when she was in the school at lunch, she was in charge of lunch, and she was just, because she didn't grow up in the United States, so she was not familiar with the abundance of milk. And
Hmm.
at snack time, she didn't grow up with, like, somebody putting a carton of milk in front of your face, and she would just see these kids. First off, like, there would be the kids who would just, they had to drink, everybody was drinking it, but then a majority of the kids, because this is in Harlem, so a lot of them are, let's just say, lactose intolerant,
Right.
and not of the ethnicities that are tolerant to lactose. And they were dumping a majority of their milk. So even from an ecological standpoint, you think about, and now as a vegan, now that I know that, as a food producer, I know the entire process of what happened, like, from the grain that feeds the cow, from how that cow gets impregnated and produces the milk, and where the milk comes from, the pasteurization, and then where it has to go into a carton in order to get to a school, and all those steps in between, just to be thrown out. And it only exists because it's mandated by the government, and it's only there because of the lobbies for those. It's just that, like, this endless loop. Like, people don't want the product, but you need to have the product because that's how our society is built upon.
Right.
It's just it's a very interesting conundrum. So one of the reasons she was very happy that we had created an allergen friendly plant-based cheese was specifically because she saw how many kids in her school didn't consume milk, and how many were afflicted with soy allergies as well, which today is just like, all these allergies are very abundant, and put a nut product in a school, forget about it.
Right.
So that's really, that perspective is really what drove it home, as far as having to be allergen friendly. And for a really long time, back to that incubator I was telling you about, we couldn't produce, like, we wanted to produce our product there at first, but we couldn't because there was a shared kitchen. So there was
Mm.
no way to ensure that there's no cross contamination, and there was no way to make sure it was kosher. Like, there's all these markets that we wanted to serve that we wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And I guess also having those higher standards, or not higher standards, but just saying, like, these are our standards, we can't settle for anything less, is what made us uh, go from step to step to step and for our first production batch to come from a factory in Wisconsin. So it's just really fascinating. Like, we were going to do all of this ourselves, but because we had that really that need for a high quality and quality assurance, it just led us in the direction to produce it how we do today.
Well, and I really appreciate the whole boundary and guideline of standards, because it's like with my podcast shows, if somebody consumes animal or dairy on any level, like, I've had people say, well, about 5% of my food is cheese or it's dairy. And it's like, well, then I don't want you on the show. And it's like, go on another show. And I've had people get upset and say, well, that's just not fair. And it's like, but that's my guideline. That's what I'm bringing to the market. And so before we go any further, Kobi, how do people reach you? What's the best way for people to get more information about your company?
Yeah, so if you want to reach me directly, and I'm sorry because I'm a little swamped more than usual these days, but the best way to find me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And there's another Kobi Regev in the universe who is an Air Force general. That's not me.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I was very happy that when you Googled me, his name came up. And we actually connected recently because of that. I was like, oh, I used to love being you as a kid. But I'm the one under founder. So you'll find me. Mr. CEO is my nickname amongst my friends.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
and you should definitely. Sorry, I didn't.
oh, and what's your web address?
Yeah. So the easiest one is just say please, pleese.com.
Okay, sayplease.com, and that's Pleese. And we'll make
Yeah.
sure to put that in the show notes.
Sure.
You know, I'm curious, recently, the school systems have taken away the lunches, the free lunches for the low income families, which is, I just am devastated by that, because there's a lot of families that relied on that. And, you know, regardless of what our political standings are, I mean, there are families that are really in need. And I'm curious where you see things going within the school systems with kids and their nutritional challenges that they experience. What do you think companies like yours can do to raise awareness around healthier eating?
I love that question. And I don't know if it's something that we can do immediately, but as you said, as you're like crafting that question, what I imagined was the vertical indoor gardens being a staple in public schools.
Ooh,
and
I love
if
that.
you could grow the vegetables that you need within the ecosystem of a building of a school year round, then they can eat healthier. They'll know how to, they might not know exactly how to grow food, but they'll know that it comes from a plant and not from a supermarket.
Right.
I'm connected with a program in New York called it's called Harlem Grown, and it's a wonderful program. It's not this, it's not what I'm describing, but it is an entrepreneur who connected with a local high school in Harlem,
Mm-hmm.
who cleared out an empty lot and turned that into a farm, and all the kids got to grow their own produce. And he kept on saying, like, kids didn't know that fruit came from a bush or a tree or what, like they had no idea.
Right.
And so just seeing that and touching it with your own and like tasting it physically brings a whole new knowledge that today kids don't have. And if you can grow produce, even if it's just for the one school in the school,
Mhm.
I think that's not just game changing, but life changing. And then if you can produce extra in those areas around the country where you have the food deserts, or at least create programs where it makes sense to like use it as a pilot, and then somebody finds a capitalistic way to engage with it.
Right. Right.
You know, we're in a capitalist society. Everything has to make monetary sense in order for people to invest in it. And I think that's one of the things that, like, one of my dreams in the future is to be able to create some sort of to complete that gap in the food system.
Well, you know, and that actually leads very nicely into the idea. Now, this is just a download. This is just, you know, from our conversation. But what occurs to me, especially when you mentioned the Harlem Grown, is to actually partner with restaurants that carry your product or would be willing to, and have a pizza cook-off. And the pizza cook-off would be fun. It would be a fundraiser and a way to raise awareness for young people to learn about where their food comes from. And with the Harlem Grown, they could actually grow their own vegetables, the tomatoes, the peppers, whatever goes on the pizza, and literally have a pizza cook-off where it's a way to not only raise awareness, but raise funding for the low-income people that can't afford the school meals. And the media would get involved with it, and Mayor Adams could get involved with it. I mean, it's just like, to me, it seems like you're in the perfect location to actually create a fun event that would be one that's educational, but it would also be something that families could go to. And, you know, so that's just off the top of my head. As you were talking, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to really bring a different flavor, no pun intended, but a different flavor to the way that people are being educated, because unfortunately there's so much propaganda out there. And if you were able to find some kind of organization, maybe the Boys and Girls Club, I don't know, but that would, really get behind this, or maybe a corporation that is really implementing initiatives to have healthier families within the New York area. So that's just off the top of my head. But I think you're in a perfect position to do that.
I keep on moving because the light's in my face, but I love.
You're in the light. Don't go into the light yet. No, not yet.
Not yet.
You're too young.
I love that idea. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And while you're saying that to me, I already connected 3 dots. I'm glad I brought up Harlem Grown, because they have the perfect stage for it. And I'm wondering, I think tomatoes are in season right now. Literally, everything that you said, I'm like, I think we could actually pull this off.
Check. Yeah, it was like, as you were talking, it was like boom, boom, boom. Because that's what I do. I get these downloads of ideas, and I've created career expos that we had 2,000 job seekers who came to, when the average was like 100 or 200 people, and it was all around collaborative efforts. And that's really where things need to move, is more collaboration, because there's so much divisiveness in the world right now. Even within the vegan space, there's divisiveness. The people who say, oh, don't talk about healthy eating. It's like, why not? If we're not healthy, we can't do what we're here to do. So I really love what you're doing. And I was so excited that you said yes to coming on the show, because, and your marketing person who reached out to me, they did a great job, because I'm a really tough gatekeeper. I have to say I am, and not everybody gets through the door. And I am thrilled that I was able to have this conversation with you, Kobi, and really wish you the greatest success. And in closing, what are your final thoughts for people?
No matter how much people tell you that whatever idea you have is silly, it's small, it's impossible, you're the only person that can make that happen. And you might not be able to do it all at once, but every single victory is a victory. And even if you stumble or fail or have these moments of self-doubt, knowing that just getting up and keep on moving that's what's going to get you across the finish line. And there's been so many times where people told, even my co-manufacturer, my manufacturing partners, sometimes they'll tell me, oh, we can't get this ingredient for 6 weeks, so your production's delayed for 2 months. And I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. And then literally 2 days later, I'll get the ingredient. And that's because there's a big difference. And this is the last thing I'm going to say on this subject, is huge difference between someone who gets paid on Friday and someone who doesn't, or someone who needs to pay other people on Friday. And if you can handle that pressure and know that it's super frustrating, then this is the life for you. And if you don't want to be frustrated, or you don't want the stress, and you don't want everything else, then come buy some products from us. We'll share a laugh and a story, and we'll make the world better together.
Fantastic. Well, Kobi, this has been delightful, and I encourage people to visit your website. Again, please give the web address.
Sayplease.com.
Sayplease.com. This is Kathleen Gage with Vegan Visibility, and wishing you a healthy life, no matter what time of day, evening, or middle of the night you're viewing this show. Have a great day.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Vegan Visibility Podcast Show. Be sure to subscribe to get notified when the next episode is live. And we always appreciate reviews. Join us next time for more inspiration, education, and motivation to build your business one cruelty-free and healthy person at a time.